Honourable members, call on Members' Order of the Day number 2.
State-owned enterprises and Crown entities protecting New Zealand's strategic assets. Amendment Bill, first reading.
I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker, I move that the state-owned enterprises and Crown entities protecting New Zealand's strategic assets Amendment Bill be now read for the first time. Mr Speaker, I nominate that this bill that the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee consider this bill. Sir, this is a very straightforward piece of legislation, and it is built on the back of 80% plus of New Zealanders who are opposed to their state-owned assets being sold in part or in whole offshore, or being sold back to them where they have to use their money for a second time to buy back what they already own. In essence, sir, the bill is about protecting the remaining strategic assets that we have on the schedules. That is New Zealand Post, Kiwi Bank, Kiwi Rail, Radio New Zealand and others for future generations. Any government under this piece of legislation, sir, trying to sell these assets will need a 75% majority in the Parliament or win a referendum. That is a fair policy. The bill ensures that strategic asset sales will need to pass a higher hurdle than they have in recent times by this government, who has used every device in the Parliament in the face of rising public angst and opposition to ram this through, abusing the constitutionality of the Select Committee process and the Parliament as a whole to ram this through, sir. Now, this will be, I've said publicly, an acid test for the government, because the government, if it is its intention not to proceed with other asset sales, because at the time of writing of this bill, sir, those asset sales, this was not drawn from the ballot till after the asset sales legislation was rammed through by the government, and those assets which are now on the block, of course, are outside the schedule. So this bill deals with those that are inside the schedule, but I have to say for the record, if it went to the Select Committee, the Labor opposition would not be opposed to amending this legislation to bring those assets which are now outside the schedule and threatened with sale back inside. But that is for another day. We'd be very happy to accept and propose that amendment. This is about enshrining and protecting what we have left. And if the government's intention is to only sell those assets which it took out of the schedule, i.e. Solid Energy, Mighty River, Genesis Meridian in New Zealand, then it would have no problem supporting this legislation. If it does not support this legislation, then the musings which Bill English back in 2008 and again in 2010, his musings about, for instance, selling off, finding it acceptable to sell off Kiwi Rail, we will know if they don't accept this piece of legislation and back it, that they have an open intent to proceed beyond those assets which they've taken out of the schedule to other assets like, for instance, the New Zealand Post, Kiwi Rail, Radio New Zealand, Kiwi Bank and others. So it's a very straightforward piece of legislation. It will also be interesting, sir, to see if Peter Dunn, the Honourable Peter Dunn, votes for this legislation, because, of course, he made a promise not to sell Kiwi Bank, not to sell Radio New Zealand. Well, I know it's a waste of time for Mr Banks, of course, because Mr Banks would sell his own grandmother if he had the chance. He'd flog everything off. We know that. So my comments actually aren't addressed to Lazarus, the man who's lurched out of the crypt and wobbled around and come back into the Parliament. My comments aren't addressed to him because... But Lazarus was more positive, that's true, he was a positive human being, but the sort of political cadaver that's come back out of the crypt and into the Parliament, I don't address my comments, sir, to him at all. Waste of time, utter waste of time. In fact, actually, sir, it's a waste of time addressing any comments to Mr Banks, because 30 seconds after you say something, he will have forgotten them, of course, because he has amnesia. So, sir, well, I'd have to, with your leave, sir, I'm happy to repeat my speech twice or in triplicate, so that he'll actually remember the words or perhaps his own name. But more seriously, sir, this is a simple choice for the Parliament. And Mr Banks can say it's a waste of time, but it's a simple choice. It's a simple choice, sir, that says we are not prepared to stand by and allow a government holus bolus to go and sell off the strategic assets that we have. We know 80% of New Zealanders are against the national government selling the assets they've put on the block now. We know that is no, it's not, what was that? I won't actually use the B word that Mr Coleman used, sir, because it was about I think it was in relation to male anatomy or something like that, and it wouldn't be appropriate. But it isn't rubbish, sir, to say that 80% of New Zealanders oppose these asset sales. It is not rubbish at all. And Mr Coleman Dr Coleman will remember those remarks as we take this fight out and when we get the referendum, sir. And then we'll have, sir, very little talk about mandates when the New Zealand people get a chance to put this to a vote in a referendum. So the choice for the National Party is very, very simple. If it is their intention, I invite Dr Coleman to get up tonight. We know Banks would sell anything he could, but I invite Dr Coleman and the other ministers to get up and tell us whether they're prepared to support the bill. If they're not prepared to support the bill, if they're not prepared to support the bill, then that tells us clearly that this government does have an intent to go well beyond, at some future date, well beyond the assets they've put on the block. Because if they're prepared to stand, are they prepared to answer this question then? Are they prepared to guarantee, is Dr Coleman prepared to guarantee that he will not sell Kiwi Rail in part or whole whilst he's in government? Sorry? Hang on, let's hear it. Sorry? Oh, there's no plans to. Well, that's in stark contrast to what Stephen Joyce said. He said he couldn't give a guarantee. He couldn't give a guarantee that Kiwi Rail would not be put on the block. So there's no plans to. That's not a guarantee of anything. That's weasel words which said it could well be on the block. Indeed, and I suspect Dr Coleman would probably be the last person to be told anyway. But let's look at this, because we know that, and John Banks would forget. Yeah, that's right. He'd forget which way the washroom was and the cabinet room was, and his own name. Because what we've seen with this passage of the SOE's legislation, sir, is that one vote in this Parliament, one vote out of over 120 members of Parliament, kissed goodbye to some seriously heavy-duty assets which are bringing in millions and billions of dollars for this country. It was down to one vote. And I think Kiwis, by their very nature, think it should not be down to one vote. There should be a proper process. And what this does is it sets in place a higher hurdle. So if the government won't support it, then the government has signalled to the people of New Zealand, as have Mr Dunn and Rumpelstiltskin in the corner, that they're prepared to actually sell and go further than those assets are on the blocks. Well, there were a few dwarfs. One was Dopey, I think, but we won't go there. Or Sleepy, I think he had amnesia as well. But the point is, sir, if they're not prepared to sell the legislation, then, to support the legislation, then I just invite the government representatives to get up and tell us, will they guarantee that they will not go beyond, in terms of selling assets, those that they have taken out of the schedule? So will they sell additional assets? Will they guarantee they won't sell additional assets? Because I think what this bill does, whether it's up or down tonight, it'll tell the New Zealand people very clearly what the agenda is, what the agenda could be, and what the government's intent is. So I invite the House to support this legislation. I look forward to the contributions. I know we'll have some very strange speeches, but the asset test for this crew, not him, but and Peter Dunn, is if they don't support this, we know that other assets will be on the block.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the honourable member Todd